Phenomenal, the speech of Helen, without a doubt. So I'm here representing Neuronet, which is one of the IMI initiatives, has been part of the neurogeneration portfolio. And of course, Neuronet has a scope that encompasses all of the neurogeneration, not just Alzheimer's or dementia. But I think that it is one of the initiatives that has really moved the needle in some ways. So let me explain that. Next slide. With a bit of a prologue, I think that IMI's impact has been outstanding on a number of fronts. And I think everyone that has witnessed IMI projects or participated in IMI projects can testify to this. Both in terms of, for example, overcoming the cultural divide, the traditional cultural divide between, for example, academia and industry, but also within academia, also within industry sometimes, promoting a very clear needs-based focus, being very pragmatic, always starting with the needs of industry and the stakeholders and trying to come up with projects that can really make a difference. Also in terms, and we just witnessed that, in terms of involving multiple stakeholders, patients, very significant, but also, for example, regulatory authorities. There has been a continuous push from IMI to actually be involving multiple stakeholders in IMI projects. And also, as Luke explained, there's a wide range of projects as well, encompassing, end-to-end, from very preclinical studies to studies that were very close to the actual development of new drugs, etc. But this is not devoid of obstacles, of course. I think that we were noticing that there's still a problem with isolation, I think, that remains where projects are seen as silos. And I don't think that is a problem of IMI by itself. I think this is a general problem. And if I can get the next slide, I think too often the scientific system is organized in a way that yields a number of castles, if you like, or mini kingdoms. Yeah, and you can see these castles, and some of them are nicer, some of them are uglier, some of them are bigger, some are smaller. But actually, castles had primarily, I think, a defensive purpose. So because of competition in the scientific system, everyone is fighting for space in journals, fighting for funding, etc. There's a tendency to fight your own war, if you like. So I think that sometimes when I think about science, and we had the recent example of the pandemic to show, I think, well, do we have the resources? Do we have the data? Do we have the human capacity to actually tackle the very important challenges that we're facing as humans? And I think yes, globally, but of course, if we fragment everything, then we're less capable actually of being able to deal with these challenges. So there's a little bit of from my point of view, a medieval organization of science still, and I think we should transition towards a new renaissance, if you like, that would allow us to actually harness better the resources that we have at our disposal in this time. So if I can get the next slide, this is a little bit where Neuronet comes in. Neuronet is a very modest project, both in terms of funding, in terms of participants, and even time schedule. But the idea here was to say, look, how can we actually transition from a collection of projects or a juxtaposition of projects towards a fully integrated program? And that's the whole idea, the whole philosophy behind Neuronet. So it's all about identifying gaps, promoting synergies across projects, multiplying the impact, enhancing visibility of the impact of such projects, etc. So if I can get the next slide. This is the fairly complex scenario that we were facing when we started Neuronet, and you can see there in terms of concentric circles, the innermost circle is the Neuronet consortium per se. Then we get the IMI neurogeneration projects, and then we get other related projects. And there's numerous connections, as you can see. There's collaborations already happening. There's institutions participating in several projects. But of course, this creates a very complex map in which you have, maybe our estimates are, 230 organizations or something like that, more than 2,000 people involved in such projects as a whole. And the problem, if I can just get one more click, the problem here is that every project has their own objectives, their own time schedule, their mindset, their culture, if you like, their governance mechanisms, and their funding. Not all are funded at the same level. So that creates an even complexer scenario, as you can see, that we had to somehow alleviate in terms of promoting more integration and more mutual knowledge, and therefore a higher impact. So if I can get the next slide. Nernet was then designed as I always like to use the switchboard metaphor, if you like, trying to identify where the actionable results were, where the synergies could be had, where the common gaps were, etc. Very importantly, we follow always a systems leadership approach. And I think that systems leadership has become more of a fashionable concept over the last decade for sure, but especially over the last years, in which people are starting to understand that there has to be a more participative structure, that true collaboration happens when there's no pitch zones. You're not trying to sell anything to the others. You're just trying to listen and to contribute significantly so as to overcome fragmentation. So for that, we felt that it was important that Nernet was actually neutral. So we are not an academic organization. And we actually came up with a minimum academic consortium for Nernet, consisting of an SME, patient representatives, and a regulatory authority. And we felt that that was important, that the kind of academically neutral position was important to us to not push a specific agenda. Also importantly, I think that in discussion with the projects, we realized that perhaps we have to move the center of gravity from the project as a concept to the asset in terms of tangible results that can be actioned for improvement. A project is a temporary construct. I think we all have to realize that it is meant to end at some point. The asset, though, can remain. It can actually become a building block for further assets. So I think that that change of focus is also important. And for that, we designed Nernet, again, following a systems leadership approach, as a very triangular structure, if you like, a three-legged stool, if you like, in which we had a scientific coordination board, which was uniting all of the leaders of the IMI new generation projects, a number of working groups that were aimed at tackling specific challenges in data sharing, in ethics and privacy, regulatory interaction, sustainability, all common problems that all or most projects face at some point. And then specific task forces to actually deal with the important challenges that we were facing, or that can actually be able to act on specific synergies. So if I can get the next slide. Let me just show you some examples of what we did in Nernet. One of them was, how can we best represent the wealth of the portfolio, the number of results that are arising from a single point of view. And this was the knowledge base that we launched publicly on February 1st, and I invite everyone to actually visit the website. You have the link there. And essentially, it offers a very integrated view of the whole IMI neurodegeneration program, with a specific focus, as Luke mentioned, on dementia, in the format of a dashboard. So you have a number of sections that you can actually browse. You can see the time schedule. You can see specific tools arising from projects, basic information about all of the projects, etc. One of those is the asset map, which is the colored circle that you see there in the middle, which tries to represent graphically the variety of assets coming out from projects. So next slide. This is a bigger image, which I appreciate, given my age already. So you can see there that there's a number of assets. Each of the logos of a project is one asset arising from such project. And this allows us to see not only how the assets are populating different areas. You see there that there's concentric circles to actually depict the stage of research, from the non-clinical to the regulatory actionable result, but also in terms of the slices of the pie, different types of assets. So if I can get one more click, you see there are a number of examples. For example, we have cohorts, like the longitudinal cohort study arising from the EPAD project, very clinical, to the data cube arising from, we heard about the roadmap project from Helen. More on the real world evidence space, you have there very preclinical things like the data set that Imprint has generated on genetic screens. And you have also, the mobile apps, those were mentioned as well. Monitoring apps for smart devices, just to help with cognitive assessments. So there's a variety of tools there. And again, I invite you to actually check the asset map on the knowledge base website. Next slide. We also wanted to gauge a little bit what's the impact and how can we depict how things evolve in the different projects. So we came up with a number of diagrams, all of them accessible from the knowledge base as well, in which you can see relationships between institutions, relationships between projects. You can detect clusters of activity, publications, etc., which gives us an impression of how collaboration happens naturally across projects and where we can actually enhance collaboration. Next slide. One of the things that we thought was not done was to actually try to assess the impact on industry. After all, this is a program that in many aspects is responding to needs of industry in a number of areas. So we just initiated a survey, and this is just interim results. We don't have the final results yet. We're already starting to see some interesting results in terms of what the FPA industry personnel were actually seeing as a result of the participation in IMI projects. For example, a third of them already saw that there was a moderate to high impact in terms of the strategic objectives of their respective companies in their respective therapeutic areas. Half of them at least saw that kind of impact in the establishment of strategic partnerships. And 60% of them were seeing an improvement in terms of the presence of their companies, in their visibility on their public image as well. So all of that as a consequence of IMI projects. Next slide. And just very quickly, we are also trying to design new ideas with the discussion across projects. Let me just give you a couple of very quick examples. The first one on the next slide is the Nernet Academy, very focused on early career researchers. I think that this particular group has been very affected by the pandemic in terms of their careers and their evolution, etc. So trying to come up with activities that will focus especially on the needs of young researchers, which are the leaders, who are the leaders of the future, after all. Next slide. Another example would be the Neuro Cohort, which is taking an asset from a project, in this case, longitudinal cohort study of EPAT, and seeing how we can take it further down the line when the project finishes. So not let it die. And in that sense, transform it into something else that may become a parent cohort, serving a number of projects in the future across Europe. And in that sense, leveraging and maximizing the impact of such project. So next slide. And this is just a representation of the Neuro Cohort. So far, very successful with almost 40 centers all across Europe willing to participate in this. Again, perfect example of what systems leadership is about. Next slide, and I'm just reaching the end. So our future landscape. You saw the complexity there. What we're trying to do with Nernet is to promote the joint perspective, to avoid the fighting your own war syndrome, and to promote across the whole portfolio problem-solving pragmatic culture of efficiency. And you will see now two outstanding examples of projects that have been participating in Nernet activities. And with that, I would like to thank especially the Nernet Consortium, but also especially thank all of the IMI neurogeneration projects, especially those that focus on dementia, for their very active and enthusiastic participation in Nernet. I think without them, this would not be possible. And I think this is a step in the right direction, not just the specific projects, but also initiatives that can actually provide the glue that maximizes the impact. Thank you.